Okay, let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful for this morning and for the blessings of this past week of study. We just ask, Lord, that as we try to complete and tie up some of the ends of this study for this week, that your Holy Spirit can instruct us, that you can enlighten our minds, and that you can give us a direction and an understanding of how to make these applications. We pray for each person. You know the struggles that we go through, the health problems that we can have living in this world of sin. And we just ask, Lord, that your angels can watch over and protect each one, that you can help us to obey your laws, and that we can have strength for the work that we need to accomplish. Thank you for each person, and thank you for the time that we have. May your Holy Spirit speak to our hearts. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So good morning, everyone. As you can see, we have the Great Seal of the United States of America on there. And this is just, we're going to go, because we talked about this, and we're just going to go through a short study. I'm going to send out this paper once it's done. So most of this paper is just directly from Wikipedia. It's not like I did a lot of writing. So the purpose of looking at the Great Seal, as we talked about yesterday, and this is a quote here from James White, I believe, who wrote the Bible Handbook, unless I think it's James White who wrote that. I need to check that up. But it says, in the last part of the fourth commandment, we find all the specifications of the seal: Lord, his name; Creator, his title; his territory, the heavens and earth. All within the territory are amenable to his law. So we have this analogy between the Great Seal, or any seal, and the Sabbath. And so the significance of the United States and its seal hasn't really fully been examined. I mean, we haven't really looked at it too much. We do know that the United States, being a symbol of modern Israel, fulfilling that role in its rebellion against the UK, and then its establishment as a parallel to northern Israel, is something that we've at least understood implicitly, and some people, such as myself, have tried to make note of this. So this is connecting the 2520, of course, to ancient Israel and all these different civil wars, and also particular for this study that we've been doing this week, dealing with this counterfeit day of worship. So the interesting point was that on July 4th, 1776, the same day that independence from Great Britain was declared by the 13 states, the Continental Congress named the first committee to design a Great Seal, or national emblem, for the country. Similar to other nations, the United States needed an official symbol of sovereignty to formalize and seal or sign international treaties and transactions. It took 6 years, 3 committees, and the contributions of 14 men before the Congress finally accepted a design, which included elements proposed by each of the 3 committees in 1782. So we can see the significance then of this Great Seal is it has to do with its relationship with other countries, international treaties and transactions. Any other thoughts about this seal that I'm not picking up here? What's the significance of the seal? Maybe if I ask a more direct question.
Okay.
If we look at at the role of the United States in prophecy. What is its role in Revelation 13?
The beast with lamb-like horns.
Yes, the beast with lamb-like horns. So what is its role?
Well, it eventually gives its military power to that of the papacy.
Right, and it's going to be involved in the mark of the beast.
Right.
Right, which the mark, that mark is the sign of the authority of the papacy. Right, so you have the seal of God, which is the mark of God's authority. And then you're going to have the mark of the beast. And so the significance of the United States in connection with its rise with this great seal, how do we address that? I mean, this seal, is it connected to the mark of the beast? I mean, it's sort of a question. Because we know it has horns like a lamb, but it speaks as a dragon. And many people would connect this great seal to the papacy. Are we going to follow that same? You understand what I'm saying? What is this seal? Is this seal something that shows a lamb-like beast, or is it something that points forward to what it's going to do in connection with the papacy, even if it's unwitting in the design of that seal?
Well, the currently accepted seal would be the one that would be pointing forward. But the first committee and I think the second committee had no clue. I mean, you look at the seal that has in its ring, rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God, which is interesting.
Right.
And then you take a look at the second seal, which they gave the date code for 1776, but then put the 13 colonies in a ring. And I mean, 13, as we have been observing, is also a numerical representation of rebellion.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would think that what's happening in the formation of the United States, even though from its inception, it's actually going to use biblical imagery, it's then going to adopt imagery and symbolism that really connects it with the Enlightenment movement, with the Illuminati, or whatever you want to call it, the Catholic Church. It's connecting itself to something that is opposed to God.
Okay.
So the first committee, which consisted of Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams, they had some proposals, but they weren't really experienced in designing these types of things. So Franklin chose an allegorical scene from the Exodus, described in his notes as Moses standing on the shore and extending his hand over the sea, thereby causing the same to overwhelm Pharaoh, who is sitting in an open chariot, a crown on his head and a sword in his hand. Rays from the pillar of fire in the clouds reaching to Moses to express that he acts by the command of the deity. And the motto, rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. So that's the one you're talking about here, this image.
Correct.
And this seems quite in contrast to what we end up with. I mean, just as a symbol of what it means symbolically. And that would have been a fantastic seal, by the way.
Well,
definitely not have the New World Order on it.
if you look at the three men that were involved in that first committee,
Yes.
Franklin, Jefferson, and Adams.
Mhm.
We're talking about the three that understood probably more than any of the others the need for the country to be a beacon of freedom.
Mhm.
And that's something that they looked upon as paramount, where others in succeeding generations have set aside.
Right. And we're going to see that in the development of this Great Seal, um, that the understanding of that is really not well entrenched in the people who are leading out in the United States. Now Jefferson suggested a depiction of children of Israel in the wilderness, led by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, for the front of the seal. And Hengst and Horsa, the two brothers who were the legendary leaders of the first Anglo-Saxon settlers in Britain, for the reverse side of the seal. Adams chose a painting known as the Judgment of Hercules, where the young Hercules must choose to travel either on the flowery path of self-indulgence or the rugged, more difficult uphill path of duty to others and honor to himself. So, and this is just, I'm trying to figure out what this picture is. So you can see that picture, that's the E pluribus unum with the two brothers. De Smettery's initial sketch in Franklin's earlier design on the 1776 currency note. So we have the different states here, the 13 states in a ring are on here. So some of these ideas are adopted in the Great Seal. In August 1776, de Smettery showed his design, which was more along the conventional heraldic lines. The shield had 6 sections, each representing the countries from which these states had been peopled. So I don't know who this de Smettery is, wherever you say his name. Smettery.
Yes, and did you get my email? I sent you a copy of Spencer's The Cult of the All-Seeing Eye.
Yeah, I did, but I didn't read it.
Yeah, I'm just starting to read it too.
Yeah, I had a really busy day yesterday, so.
We all do, Theodore, we all do.
Yeah, it's just that one of the workers
Fully understand.
took a week off, so I don't have as much time this week as I normally have. But anyway, I'm not going to go into all the different details here, but you're going to see that there's going to be this gradual formation of this these symbols. Now, the second committee, has something that starts to look a bit more like what this seal is. You see the shield here, and the 13 colonies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 as stars. And it's going to have the dates here. So I'm not going to go reading through all of this. You can see that they have these different virtue. So all these different symbolic things. Liberty is seated in a chair holding an olive branch, and her staff is topped by a liberty cap. The motto, virtue perennis, means everlasting because of virtue. And they have the 1776 in Roman numerals. So as they develop it from these different committees, you can start to see that the third committee is developing something that even looks more like what we presently have. And we can see what they call the Eye of Providence, or the all-seeing eye above the 13 steps of the pyramid. And there's virtue there. Yeah.
Quickly to interject.
Yeah.
Pierre Eugene de Smettery
Okay.
served as artistic consultant for the committees. So he served as a consultant for all 3 committees.
Yeah.
He served as an artistic consultant for the committees that designed the Great Seal of the United States. In 1776, submitted the first proposed design to include the Eye of Providence, an element which was eventually adopted. So from the early on, they were trying to put these issues of New World Order into this seal.
Yeah, so I don't know much about this guy's history, but based on his last name,
he was born in Geneva.
Yeah.
He died in Philadelphia. He was, after he left Geneva, he spent more than a decade in the West Indies before moving to New York and then to Philadelphia.
Okay.
Now, he suggested the adoption of the US motto, E pluribus unum.
Yeah.
He designed the seal of New Jersey, of Delaware, and of Georgia. So he did 3 seals.
Okay.
He painted the first known portrait of George Washington that was later used for the 1791 1-cent coin. He received an honorary degree from Princeton in 1781. And Thomas Jefferson's daughter, Martha, took drawing lessons from D. Smithery.
Okay. So he's going to be Swiss then or something, right?
He is Swiss. The thing is that he was also the translator into French for the letters to the inhabitants of Canada from the Continental Congress, designed to draw the new British subjects of Quebec into the American Revolutionary War.
So he wanted Quebec to join in the revolution against Great Britain.
Yep.
Interesting. So, so there's something going on there that, maybe we just don't know, but interesting. Okay, so he's the one who introduces some of this symbolism.
Right.
So whether there's some training he has that would suggest this, in that he just wants to copy things that he's seen in other seals, or whether he actually has a purpose that we can't really say. Now, I know that a lot of times when we look at, because I've read a lot of the suppositions of others regarding this, where they really sort of take the position that the leaders of the United States were themselves illuminists, and that they were intentional in what they were doing with this symbolism, but I don't see any evidence of this. And especially if you look at what Benjamin Franklin, which is one that everybody says was an illuminist, what he proposes, at least back at that time, he's definitely looking at biblical symbolism that doesn't appear to have any sort of New Age or false worship ideas in it. He seems to be pure in his ideas of understanding what the United States represents. So I don't know. There's all kinds of theories and suppositions that people make, claims people make, that I know lots of them are not true because I've researched them in the past. Don't remember all the details, but people make a lot of assumptions. But what we do know is that what ends up in the Great Seal, in its symbolism, points to this globalism rather than the Republic. So the seeds are planted there in the symbols. And I think we can at least agree upon that, however they ended up there. And so it's the final design here is just a description of what it would look like. I can't read it, it's too small, but it's just a photo of Thomas Jefferson's description of that final design. Now, In June 13th, 1782, the Congress turned to its secretary, Charles Thomson, and provided all materials submitted by the first three committees. Thomson was 53 years old and had been a Latin master at the Philadelphia Academy. Thomson took elements from all three previous committees, coming up with a new design which provided the basis for the final seal. So he's going to be the one who really designs this. Thomson used the eagle, this time specifying an American bald eagle, as the sole supporter of the shield. The shield had 13 stripes, this time in a chevron pattern, and the eagle's claw held an olive branch and a bundle of 13 arrows. For the crest, he used Hopkins' constellation of 13 stars. The motto was E pluribus unum, taken from the first committee, and was on a scroll held in the eagle's beak. An eagle holding a symbol, the symbols of war and peace, has a long history and also echoed the second committee's themes. Franklin owned a 1702 emblem book, which included an eagle with olive branch and arrows near its talons, which may have been the source for Thomson. The arrows also mirror those in the arms of the Dutch Republic, the only country in Europe with a representative government at the time, which depicted a lion holding 7 arrows representing their 7 provinces. State currency may have provided further inspiration. A 1775 South Carolina bill showed a bundle of 13 arrows, and a 1775 Maryland note depicted a hand with an olive branch of 13 leaves. Thomson's drawing the basis for the final seal. That's just what it's showing there. For the reverse, Thomson essentially kept Barton's design, but re-added the triangle around the Eye of Providence and changed the mottos to, however you say that, Annuit Coptis and Novus Ordo Seclorum. Thomson sent his designs back to Barton, who made some final alterations. The stripes on the shield were changed again, this time to pale-wise, vertical, and the eagle's wings position was changed to displayed wingtips up instead of rising. Barton also wrote a more properly heraldic blazon. The design was submitted to Congress on June 20th, 1782, and was accepted the same day. Thomson included a page of explanatory notes, but no drawing was submitted. This remains the official definition of the Great Seal today. So we have the first sealed document is used by Thomson on September 16th, 1782, to verify signatures on a document which authorized George Washington to negotiate an exchange of prisoners. Now, Charles Thomson was the keeper of the seal, and he kept it until the federal government was formed in 1789. On July 24th, 1789, President Washington asked Thomson to deliver the seal to the Department of Foreign Affairs in the person of Roger Alden, who kept it until the Department of State was created. So we're going to see that the Department of State is created on July 27th, 1789. So the significance of this Great Seal and its connection to the Department of State can't be ignored. Because really, in order for this Department of State to operate, it needs this seal, right? So this has to do with diplomatic documents or it's international affairs. That's really the reason you have the seal. So all of this comes together, really, in my view, on July 27th, 1789. On September 15th, 1789, the United States Congress ordered that the seal heretofore used by the United States in Congress assembled shall be and hereby is declared to be the seal of the United States. So they make this declaration in September, but really with the development of the Department of State, or the State Department, as it's called, on July 27, 1789, this becomes an interesting point. Now, so all of that was from Wikipedia. Now we have some observations. So I placed these dates here, and so these are just like when the first committee was named, second committee formed, the third committee formed, Charles Thompson chosen, all these different dates. And I laid them out here. And what we have is many different numbers that show up. And one is we see symbols like 770, 810, 40, and 88. And especially significant are the spans associated with June 20th, 1782. So we're going to see 7 days, 88 days in connection with this. So it also seems significant that 7 years after it had been first used, less a day is the first day of the 5th month on the biblical calendar. It was first used 88 days after it had been submitted and accepted. And after Charles Thompson was chosen, it was only 7 days until it was submitted and accepted. There were 6 years given to committees to accomplish what was done by one man in 7 days. So I had shown this chart the other day. Now, we could spend a lot more time with this, but just looking at this span here, we talked about these 13 years. So that's from July 4th, 1776 to September 15th, 1789. That period of time from June 26th. So we're using June 26th, 1782 as this pivotal period. And you can see the 7 days and the 88 days on either side, the 40 days, the 770 days, the 2,503 days, spanning from September 16th, 1782 to July 24th, 1789. Now, and if we go back this period of 6 years and this period of 7 years, so there's a significance here in that it's 13 years altogether. And then also we have this period of time, which is from September 16th, 1782 to September 15th, 1789. Now, I made this comment that the day that it's first used is the first day of the 5th month on the biblical calendar. So I didn't put that in the chart. Now, the other point I want to address is a point brought up by Jeff Pippenger back in last year. And I probably should find the video where he talks about this. So he first mentioned it, that there was 490 years from July 27th, 1299 to July 7th, or July 27th, 1789. Now, he was looking at all these different July 27ths, but this one seemed to him the most significant. Now, so if I go between these two dates, and I'll try to make this a little bigger here. So July 27th, 1299, which is the 26th day of the 4th month. And I count to July 27th, 1789. I have 1789, 62 days. So one of the things that we see here is in the number of days, we have the year 1789, but we also have this symbol of 62. And I'm comparing this with the 62 weeks. Now, what I did is at the beginning here, you can see that July 27th is the Julian date. The Gregorian date is August 3rd. Now, in 1752, the Americans and the British adopted the Gregorian calendar. So these are Gregorian dates over here. And if I go from the Gregorian date, August 3rd, 1299, to August 3rd, 1789. I go 7 days past July 27th, 1789. And that, the biblical date, is the 10th day of the 5th month. So I thought that was significant. Now, if I count the number of days, it's 1789, 69. So you can see the symbol of the 62 weeks and the symbol of the 69 weeks here at the end in connection with the year 1789. And then if I go to the 26th day of the 4th month in 1789, I come to the symbol for midnight, July 21st, 1789. That's going to be 6 days before July 27th. So I can see this 26th day of the 4th month and the 10th day of the 5th month as symbols in 1789 connected with this 490 years. And then that June 20th, 1782, there you can see the 7 years. So the 7 years are a symbol that is connected with the 490 years. So we have all these symbols connected with the 490 years. Now, what would be the significance? So we have these symbols. What does it mean? We're connecting, and this is the development of the State Department. So what would this mean prophetically if we're going to go back to the rise of the Ottoman Empire on July 27th, 1299, on the 26th day of the 4th month, and we're going to connect to this history in 1789 in connection with the State Department and with the Great Seal. What does this mean?
Well, from what you're showing here with these 62 and 69, of course, we can draw from that the symbol of what we were seeing out of Daniel 9, because the 62 weeks followed by the 69 weeks were all representations for the coming of the Savior.
Yeah, so the 62 weeks is that center division. The 69 weeks and the 62 weeks both end at the beginning of the 70th week, right? So the 70th week is that last week.
Right.
So it's not like it's exactly the same, but it has the symbols from the 490-year prophecy.
Well, no, the point, though, that you're trying to make would be that this is a representation of a nation that is going to bring forth the second coming of the Savior.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the fact that you have both the 4th or 26th day of the 4th month and the 10th day of the 5th month symbols adds to that.
And this deals with the destruction of Jerusalem and Islam. And we're connecting to this prophecy with Islam. And that July 27th, 1299 shows up in connection with the prediction regarding what's going to happen in Nashville, right? Obviously, we're using Josiah Litch's prophecy, but it even connects with the bombing of Hiroshima. So there's all kinds of things that we can see. You know, for instance, the bombing of Hiroshima is 666 Islamic years from July 27th, 1299. So you have all of these connections to this July 27th, 1299 in connection with the United States and judgments against the United States. So the United States is being raised up here, but it's going to fail in these symbols. That is, it's not going to, as a nation, fulfill what God purposed for it. Would we agree with that statement?
No disagreement.
Yeah. But yet God's purposes still will be fulfilled. So there's something about this in trying to understand the present time. Because I definitely don't think any of this is accident. Now, we know that the State Department, its purpose is international affairs. And the United States is going to interact with Islam in its early history.
Very correct.
Yeah. So
And that's-
and I haven't studied that history in detail. I don't know all the details. I just know that they interacted with Islam.
Well, I have started to study that. It's something that I began looking at over 2 years ago, and there are some points that are fairly direct about the United States' initial interactions with Islam.
Now, the United States formed a navy and we talked about this, but something about 1798 has to do with its navy.
Okay,
Yeah, and you looked into that a bit.
well, okay, if we take a look at this,
Mhm.
currently the claim is made that there are 8 branches to the United States military, but at the outset, we could identify 4 branches.
Okay.
Now, in this situation, the initial branches before the United States became a nation were the US Army, the US Navy, and then the Marine Corps. Now, the Continental Army was founded 14th of June of 1775, which was the 15th day of the 3rd month. But when it became the United States Army, it was founded on the 3rd of June of 1784, which was the 14th day of the 3rd month.
Okay.
The next branch that was founded was what we currently call the U.S. Coast Guard, which was originally called the United States or the U.S. Revenue Cutter Service. It was founded as a branch for the United States on the 4th of August of 1790, which was the 22nd day of the 4th month.
Okay.
The U.S. Navy, as the Continental Navy, was 13th of October of 1775, which was 18th day of the 7th month, but then was founded as the United States Navy as 27th day of March of 1794, which was the 24th day of the 12th month. But when you come to the Marine Corps, Continental Marines, 10th of November of 1775, United States Marine Corps, 11th of July of 1798. It is the one that was founded in 1798.
Okay.
26th day of the 3rd month.
Now, and I don't fully understand the American military, but what's the significance of the Marine Corps?
Well, it is the Marine Corps of the United States that had the initial physical interaction against Islam. It was the one that went into battle against Islam. And if you were to listen to what is called the Marine Corps hymn, their line is from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli.
Mhm.
Now, here they're giving reference to the fact that the Marines have battled in Mexico, they have battled Islam, and directly the battle against Islam was taking place during the first 7 years since the United States Marines were founded.
Okay.
Because
Starting in 1798.
in 1798, the president of the United States at that time, John Adams, was having issues because the powers of Europe had been paying tribute to different caliphates to keep their people free from having to serve as indentured slaves to Islam.
Okay.
Thomas Jefferson in 1801 decided we're not paying this anymore. He sent the Marines using the United States Navy to begin battle against Islam at that time.
Okay. Yeah. So there's some real significance there. That,
It's huge.
yeah. And so the Marine Corps, its role is an international military action. It's not defensive in the same way that the Army would be.
Right.
Right. So it's involved in, I don't know if the word is intrigue is the right way, but it was the Marines, for instance, who went in and captured, what's his name? I always forget these guys' names.
Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden, right? So there's something about this of the role of the Marines that I don't fully understand. I mean, why they have this different branch. They don't have the Army; they have these Marines, and they're highly trained specialists.
Yes.
And they do more like surgical attacks. They're not involved in full war battles like the Army would be. Occupation, you understand what I'm saying. At least that's just my impression from watching movies and things like that and listening to the news. So the significance then of 1798 in connection with the Marines and this connection with Islam, this connects us to this history as well, even though this goes to 1789. But it does connect us to Islam. So there's something about the United States and Islam that I don't think we fully have understood. But if we look at Islam and the United States as Islam and Israel, what would be the relationship there? I mean, maybe that's not a good enough question to ask. Maybe
I don't know that I would have an answer to that question.
I really think we should explore this further next week. Because there's some study that we're going to have to do to look at this. And part of what we're doing, so right now, we're actually going to go back to the November 22nd, 2018 prediction. But that prediction was made in connection with trying to understand both the November 9th, 2019 prediction and the July 18, 2020 prediction. The July 18, 2020 prediction, of course, dealing with Islam. But we also believe that Raphi and Panium, November 9th and July 18th, once we had formulated those and we had separated from the Omega, or they separated from us, we now had this position that they were going to be Raphi and Panium. That is a battle between the king of the north and the king of the south, with the south winning, and then a battle between the king of the north and the king of the south, with the north winning ultimately, and the king of the south being Islam. Well, I guess we should say not Islam, the king of the south being Russia, and Islam connected with that somehow, right? So, and that's the thing that I don't fully understand of how we understood this. I mean, I'm not sure what it was we were expecting to happen at Raphia. Now, by the time we got to November 9th, we already had abandoned that anything that Tess had predicted about November 9th would come to pass. The only thing we preserved was that it was a type of close of probation, but only for the false priests. That there's a separation in the movement was created by that. But we were then, like the Millerites, as we approached our predicted date, July 18th, we sort of abandoned a lot of the things that we had connected to it and things that had to precede it. So all we were looking for in July 18th was the destruction of Nashville, but we really had no idea of what was going to happen. And we definitely didn't have any, how this was connected to the Battle of Raphia or Panium. Correct?
Agreed.
So, and as we looked at this, we started to recognize that Josiah Litch, when we went back and examined the history, that he had this idea that Islam was the king of the South, or Islam, pardon me, Islam was the king of the North, and the king of the South was Egypt, or Turkey specifically, the king of the North. Now, I think that we have had the same problems as the Millerites in trying to understand exactly what's involved. Now, we have the suggestion, and these are things we're going to have to explore. I'm just summing up some of the problems. Things that we had to explore in connection with the fall of the Soviet Union and how we saw what happened in 1989 initially. And then our reevaluation of that, when Jeff reevaluated that, he came to the conclusion that Moscow was the head and that survived. And so we have to examine a whole bunch of things that we haven't really settled on. One is because we were constantly shifting in some of our interpretations, just as the Millerites were. There wasn't this consistency all the way through, right from the beginning to the end. As things unfolded, they had to reevaluate their understanding of certain things. And this had to do with the interpretation of events, but not with the chronology itself. That's the thing that's quite interesting. Now, I say that because we know that there was a recognition that the prophecies didn't end in the spring, they ended in the fall. And so we could say, well, that's a correction of the chronology, but it's really not. It's a correction of the interpretation of that chronology or that history, because we're not going to all of a sudden move from 457 BC to some other year. We're refining, or the Millerites were refining the dates as they approached them. And so there is a type of correction, but it's not a wholesale correction. And after the disappointment, many people try to do that. So they try to say, well, maybe we're not going to start in 457. So just that there's a refinement is not really a correction of ultimately the whole thing, right? And so we don't have that. We have to go back and look at what our problems were in regard to those events and recognize that the time was correct. And that was correct in Miller's prediction. The 1335 did end, the 1335 years or days did end when he expected them to end, but he didn't understand what that event meant. He believed that blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1335 had to do with the second coming, but it had to do with the light of the second angel. So I know I'm just kind of skipping over these things really quickly, but that's why we're looking at November 22nd, because it was something that was given to us, I believe, to understand our prediction. And after the event is something that we have to look at in our evaluation of this message, what it means. So I'm just going to quickly go back to this paper, but we're going to have to deal with this on the whiteboard. Any final comments on the Great Seal and the State Department? I mean, we can come back to some of these points later on.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Okay. Now, so one of the things that we find interesting is that there was these three committees. When we're looking at the Civil War, we're going to have these three visions of Ellen White. And these groups of three, I think, are significant. They shouldn't be sort of just glossed over. Now, I've also dealt with some points that we haven't really addressed that I looked at in my paper, but even didn't fully examine, had to do with the different states when they seceded from the Union. So, and then we had Ellen White's third vision, and that third vision really is addressing this idea of what the war is about, but also it's going to address these fast days. Now, I never did come back to that statement that I said I was going to find, but I can find it here quickly. So anybody remember what I'm talking about? So what did Ellen White say in that vision that's not included, that I talked about?
Is this the one that she says we can now participate in this fast because they had sort of gone against slavery?
Right. So this national fast, right? That was the point that she was talking about. So this national fast, I'm trying to find it here quickly. Yeah, so. Which to me seems like an odd thing, a national fast. Now, and I think that's my key words are this national fast. Okay, so here it is. This is actually in First Testimonies. So I'm going to switch screens here. Okay. So she says, I saw that these national fasts were an insult to Jehovah. He accepts no such fasts. The recording angel writes in regard to them, ye fast for strife and debate, to smite with the fist of wickedness. I was shown how our leading men have treated the poor slaves who have come to them for protection. Angels have recorded it. Instead of breaking their yoke and letting the oppressed go free, these men have made the yoke more galling for them than when in the service of their tyrannical masters. Love of liberty leads the poor slaves to leave their masters and risk their lives to obtain liberty. They would never venture to leave their masters and expose themselves to the difficulties and horrors attending their recapture if they had not as strong a love for liberty as any of us. So what is she talking about that's happening here? Why are these national fasts an insult to Jehovah? How is the North treating the slaves who are fleeing the South?
Well, I know that some of them sold those slaves back to their masters and threw them in jail until their masters came to claim them.
Right, and they treated them terribly. So
horribly.
Yeah. So
in most cases.
The escaped slaves have endured untold hardships and dangers to obtain their freedom, and as their last hope, with the love of liberty burning in their breasts, they apply to our government for protection, but their confidence has been treated with the utmost contempt. So was the American government in the North treating these slaves properly?
Absolutely not.
Right. So for the North to have this national fast, when it's not addressing this problem correctly, Ellen White just says, is an insult. So the implication here, though she doesn't state it directly, she doesn't say you can't participate in this national fast, but the implication is later when she talks about what happens with the Emancipation Proclamation and the fast that's going to happen on April 30th in 1863, that then they can participate in that fast. So the implication here is, obviously, if this is an insult to Jehovah, you wouldn't participate in it. So she doesn't state this explicitly here. So she says, the escaped slaves have been told by their masters that the northern men wanted to get possession of them, that they might cruelly misuse them, that the abolitionists would treat them worse than they had been treated while in slavery. All manner of horrible stories have been repeated in their ears to make them detest the North, and yet they have a confused idea that some hearts in the North felt for their grievances and would yet make an effort to help them. This has been the only star which has shed its glimmering light upon their distressed and gloomy bondage. The manner in which the poor slaves have been treated has led them to believe that their masters have told them the truth in these things. And yet a national fast is proclaimed. Said the Lord, is not this the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke? When our nation observes the fast which God has chosen, then will he accept their prayers as far as the war is concerned. But now they enter not into his ear. He turns from them. They are disgusting to him. It is so managed that those who would undo the heavy burdens and break every yoke are placed under censure or removed from responsible stations, or their lives are planned away by those who fast for strife and debate and to smite with the fist of wickedness. So one of the things that we see, and Ellen White is clear, is that the North, as long as it's treating the slaves in this manner, is not going to win this war. And so we can say that from a biblical perspective, from a prophetic perspective, that the Emancipation Proclamation is the reason that the North won the war, at least in part. Would we agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Yeah. So this was the point that I was making in regard to that. Now, when we go back then to, so I just wanted to tie up that loose end. So we see this Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, Lincoln's proclamation that freed the slaves, allowed Ellen White to recommend that Adventists observe the fast on April 30th of that year. Prior to this, she saw any observance of national fast as wrong due to the hypocrisy of the North. Also, it is interesting that the Thanksgiving on November 26, 1863 was 30 weeks after that fast. It is since this date that Americans continue to observe Thanksgiving on the last Thursday of November, right? So that's going to be Lincoln's Thanksgiving. So we have this Emancipation Proclamation, we have this fast, and then we have this Thanksgiving. And so that becomes the fourth Thursday of November, not the last Thursday of November. So I can't correct a PDF. Oh, well. So that's a mistake that I made there. We know that his proclamation for this Thanksgiving is October 3rd. And that was the same date that George Washington proclaimed a Thanksgiving on November 26th, for November 26th, was on October 3rd, 1782, but I can't remember. We have it on our list. So, and then we dealt with the line of the Civil War itself. So we're going to have to come back to that line of the Civil War. And the Emancipation Proclamation is on the 10th day of the 10th month. So the significance of that is that the 10th day of the 10th month is a symbol of the siege. And it's a symbol that keeps showing up. So I don't know whether we want to try to address that in more detail here. Now, I'm just seeing what I have here. So this is... So this is just that chart, which we've looked at before. Now, so here we have Ellen White's first vision. We have the start of the Civil War, April 12th. We have the 100 days to the Battle of Manassas. We have the August 3rd, 1861 Midnight Cry. And that's well, I put it as the midnight cry. That's going to be Ellen White's second vision. And then we have the third vision that I marked as the Sunday law. Now, Stephen pointed out that there doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason to what I did with this line. Have you given it any thought, Stephen, at all, since we talked about this before?
I haven't.
Okay. Now, so obviously I'm creating this line, this sort of artificially, but it's based upon two different things. First, we have the first day of the first month is the start of the Civil War, and that's a symbol of 9/11. And the Battle of Manassas is a symbol of midnight because it's July 21st, 1861. Now, when I put Ellen White's second vision as the midnight cry, and I'm going to take all of this as the second angel's message. So maybe this is, we're taking this history of the Civil War and we're going to compare it to our history. But it's also a history of the start of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, right? This history of the Civil War. And that goes all the way into 1863. So we have the Civil War that rises in the United States. And it is at a time when the church should have accomplished their mission and Christ could have come. But they have this issue. The United States is involved in slavery. Now, somebody asked me a question regarding this, Tess's view about slavery. Now, we can see that the Omega has obscured the truth, because was slavery or is slavery an issue for the United States prophetically?
I had to
Yes.
walk away for a second, but I would have to say yes.
Yeah. So we know that it is true. Now, even if we looking back to what we studied earlier regarding Benjamin Franklin's suggestion for the Great Seal, he's going to choose the Exodus and the crossing of the Red Sea. And again, the crossing of the Red Sea is baptism. It's also a representation of 9/11 in some ways, right? So we can see that all of these symbols, these biblical symbols, are tied in with the United States. The United States is tied in chronologically with these symbols, and also just prophetically based upon Revelation 13 and other things. So some people don't see the United States, in prophecy. Many Christians wouldn't. But of course, one of the reasons they don't is they believe that modern Israel is fulfilling prophecy, and they don't have an understanding of spiritual Israel. So we can see that this symbol of the first day of the first month, it's also connected with ancient Israel. I mean, obviously the start of the calendar, this month will be to you the beginning of months, and that original Exodus is going to be connected to it. Now, so we see this civil war arises at this time in 1861 on the first day of the first month. But Ellen White has also had a vision of it 30 days prior or 90 days prior, which is 3 prophetic months. So it's going to be on the 29th day of the 10th month that she has this first vision. And then we have this Battle of Manassas, and it's extremely important from a prophetic role. Now, when we deal with the King of the North and the King of the South as symbols, we saw it in connection with the Civil War in Isaiah chapter 7 and 8. And we already had connected this Civil War, the King of the North and the King of the South. But have we connected this to the symbol of the King of the North and the King of the South in Daniel chapter 11? And if we have, how have we done that?
Well, we connected them to the Republican Party and the Democrats.
Okay, so the Republicans and the Democrats. So the Democrats are the South and the Republicans are the North. That's how it happened to be in the Civil War. Now, when we had the events of January 6, 2021, that was my suggestion, at least, whether this was really well understood before or not. But I saw this as a battle between the King of the North and the King of the South. And in this case, the King of the South wins. And the King of the South shouldn't have won. That is, Trump shouldn't have lost that election as far as I'm concerned. The battle that went on there was a very tight battle, but it was won because of the failure of the Republican Party itself, not because of anything that the Democrats did. So, how history will look at January 6th, 2021 will depend to a large degree what happens in the next few years. Right now, it's seen as this insurrection, which I don't think is correct, but it's definitely an exaggeration on the part of the Democrats. But we can see that it is a victory of globalism. And if we're going to connect the Democrats with the King of the South, we have to connect it with atheism. Are we sound in that interpretation, or is there a problem? And even if there are some problems, what would those problems be and how would they be addressed? I know those are big questions. Do we look at that as being raffia or just a type of raffia? Are we still expecting Russia and the United States to be involved in a battle between the King of the North and the King of the South? Or was that an interpretation that needed to be corrected? Any thoughts on this?
It's possible that this is an interpretation that needed to be corrected.
Yeah, so it is possible. So, and that's not removing the foundation, because in some ways, the interpretation that we came up with was not our initial understanding of events. When we came up with the interpretation regarding the USSR now being Moscow in our history, there was a logic to it, but I also believe that there was some problems with it. Now, part of the problem that I saw is when Jeff tried to apply Alexander the Great to Trump. And what would be the problem with that?
Alexander was Greek.
He's Greek. He's a globalist. Trump is not a globalist. So now we have this King of the North and this King of the South battle. Now, when we're going to go back to the history that we're addressing here in this Thanksgiving Day prediction, what we want to see here. So I'm going to switch now again. Screens, just hang on. So we go back to November 22nd, 977 BC. And what we saw there was this counterfeit day of worship. Now, I'm going to point something out here. So I'm going to write on the whiteboard something. So I'll switch this all here.
This date of the 15th day of the 8th month has a particular characteristic that we need to take into account. And I don't know if I've ever shared this, but I'm going to go back to this history. So we should all be familiar with this. These are these chiasms. And this one we're going to deal with as, I'm just going to say it's 70, even though it's 69 days. So this is the one, this is in 457 BC, connection with Ezra. Now, he's going to also have some other things over here. I'm just going to add these. The first day of the 10th month and the first day of the first month. These are going to be this period of time for the divorce. Whatever that means as a symbol, I don't know. But in this period of time here, between the 10th day of the 7th month and the 20th day of the 9th month, what's the center?
The 15th day of the 8th month.
So it's the 15th day of the 8th month. Now, of course, we know that this is a symbol for the midnight cry, right? Now, this could just be tying us to the history in Millerite history as a symbol, right? Because we have all these symbols in this line that tie us to Millerite history, either to Samuel Snow's letters or, you know, I mean, this one's obviously the first day of the first month. The 12th day of the first month has to do with Miller's understanding of the 70 weeks. This is going to be June 22nd. This is going to be Samuel Snow's, the writing of his third letter, and June 22nd becomes a symbol for FFA. So these also tie to our history. The first day of the 5th month, we of course know that that's the midnight cry, the Day of Atonement. This is in our history, December 25th, 2021. But if we look between these two dates, we get this symbol, which is a symbol of the midnight cry. But it is also the date on the biblical calendar that Jeroboam chooses to have this counterfeit feast day. And so the question is, why? And I mean, there's so many different connections. I mean, we know that we connect this to the prophecy of Ezekiel and so forth. So many of these things we can't really fully address. And so whether, I mean, obviously Jeroboam has no understanding of what he's doing. He's just choosing to counterfeit the Feast of Tabernacles by going 1 month later than the Jews. Or than Judah, right? So northern Israel is going to choose to celebrate a feast like unto the feast in Judah. And that's going to be the Feast of Tabernacles that he's going to do this feast like unto. And so this is a fall feast, which we would place as connected to Thanksgiving, right? So in our history, if we're going to look at America as a fulfillment of this, that's what we're looking at. So this is an interesting symbol that it exists here in this chiasm, 35 days and 35 days, which symbolizes 3.5 years. So it's again that chiasm of Christ. Any thoughts? What's that?
Yeah, you have 520 years from 977.
Yeah.
Which in prophetic days is 187,200.
Right. So, yeah, so if we go back to 977 to 457 BC, we have a symbol of July 18, 2020
Yes.
in prophetic years. Yeah. So as I say, there's so many different connections. There's so much detail here that it's really hard to take this all in our head and put it all together. But that's the thing that we have to address. We know we have all of these symbols, and now we have to make sense out of them. What do they mean? Now, and this goes back to early in our message, all kinds of different understandings. It goes to Millerite history. And so now we have, in 2018, we have 2 dates that are predicted. And then what I'm going to notice, Heidi and I are going to notice, is that this civil war is significant. And that the dates in connection with this civil war are significant. And we looked already at some of these symbols, this period of time from Abraham Lincoln's Thanksgiving proclamation, where it now is going to be the 4th Thursday in November. And it continues that way for the most part, except for that little aberration that we had. And then it's going to be 154 years to Trump. And we connect Lincoln back to over to George Washington here in November 26, 1789 to November 26, 1863. But we can also then connect Lincoln to Trump. And we've already connected Washington to Trump. So Lincoln is a connection between George Washington, but also Trump is a connection to George Washington and Lincoln. And so he makes this proclamation. Now it's November 23rd, 2017. Now, and I'd asked the question before, and I don't know if anybody's going to care or they're going to understand what I'm going to say here. But when you have on our calendar, on a Gregorian calendar, if Christmas is on a Friday, next year, what day will it be on? What day of the week? If it's on a Friday, this year, what year would it be on next week or next year?
Thursday.
No, it'd be a Saturday. It's always going to be one day later, right? Unless there's a leap year, it'll be 2 days later, right? Now,
Correct.
but Thanksgiving is a fixed day of the week, right? So it's not a fixed date like Christmas is. So every year it's going to show up one date earlier. That's why if November 23rd, 2017, that's a Thursday. If you looked at November 23rd, 2018, that would be a Friday. So that means that Thanksgiving is going to move one day earlier. So I explained it to Heidi and I think she got it. So hopefully people get what I'm talking about. Because it's a fixed date of the week, it's always going to show up one date earlier, except on a leap year, it will show up 2 dates earlier. Now, Thanksgiving can only be as early as November 21st and as late as November 28th. So anyway, in 2018, so that was just to clear up something I was unclear about. Anybody get that? Did they understand that now?
Yes,
Okay, good.
I do.
Yeah, because sometimes I get confused, but this helped me. Explaining it to someone else helped me understand it. Okay, so now we looked at the problem that we had of placing the biblical date in 2018 for November 22nd, and that we have all these different problems. Am I going to use Jerusalem? Am I going to use Boston? Am I going to count, since it's the 8th month, I would observe the moon, right? But I could have just counted from 3029, 3029. Many people do that when it comes to these later dates in the year. And so it was really difficult for me back then to figure out what date this was. And I think initially I put the 13th day of the 8th month. And then I changed it here to the 12th day of the 8th month. And it can also be the 14th day of the 8th month. So somebody looking at this problem would say, well, you can just fudge these dates to fit however you want to. But we can't always. Sometimes it's just very clear cut. There isn't really any discrepancy or any sort of other options. But some years there are, and some months there are different ways in which we can try to determine what that date is. Now, when it comes to things in the past, we can't know. Now, the other issue, like we can't know with a certainty because, you know, there could have been weather issues. But we do know in 2018 what the weather was like in Jerusalem. And but we also have the other issue that you have to look at how many days there are in that particular month. That is, you can't have a month start on the 29th or the 28th day, right? So on the 29th, you go out to see the first visible crescent. And if you see it, then the next day is the first day of the month. If you don't see it, the next day is the 30th. And you don't have to go out the next day. So the only date on the biblical calendar that you need to go out to observe the start of a month is the 29th. And you'll see all kinds of books where they'll talk about each day they go out and they watch for it. But they don't. It's either 29 or 30. You can't have a month with 28 days. And you can't have a month with 31 days. You know, and some people have proposed, well, you know, they did. There's no evidence of it. And this would be illogical. But there are people who don't really know what they're talking about. They just assume this. So it's not like they understand the issue. They just assume, well, they must have done that. If the weather was bad, they would have ended up having to keep adding days. But you wouldn't do that. So the problem then, looking at this date, is that, and I'm going to have to go there here in a sec. Just have to bring this up. So one of the things I use is Skyview Cafe. And I know it's not really easy to see on other people's computer, but it's skyviewcafe.com. And it's a pretty good program for just looking at the months. Like
I can see it.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't see all the little print in there, I don't think. Maybe you can if you got a really big screen.
Yeah, I guess I can't.
Yeah. So so it's, you know, if you go to skyviewcafe.com, you can look at these things. Now, here I have November 2018. Now, I can zoom in a little bit, but it doesn't really help too much. Now, this is going to be then the start of the 8th month. Now, the start of the 7th month is then going to be fixed based upon the start of the year. So what I'm going to do is go to this Torah calendar, and I'm going to go. Now, they actually are going to start that year 2018. They're going to start it a month earlier because they follow the Karaite and rabbinic idea that you can start the year before the equinox, but that's not a biblical idea. And so they're going to call this the 2nd month, but they're going to look at here. I'm going to look at the new moon day. So if I go to the new moon day is the evening of April 17th, 2018. If you went to Jerusalem and you were at the Temple Mount, you should see the first visible crescent. This line here is the line in which the crescent would be observable. If it was below this line, as in the day before, you wouldn't be able to see it. It would be too close to the sun. There would be too much sunlight obscuring it. Plus, the angle would be such that the crescent would be extremely small. So you just wouldn't be able to see it. Now, This line, of course, in some ways is arbitrary. That is, atmospheric conditions can change how much the sun obscures the observance of the first visible crescent. So sometimes they'll have something just above the line and sometimes something just below the line. And it's hard to know for certain whether it would be observable. And even with like camera and modern technology, sometimes we can observe it if the conditions are right when it's below this line, but you wouldn't have been able to do so by the naked eye. And sometimes it could be above this line, but it would still not be observable, maybe just because of cloud, but even just humidity in the air can change this line. So to place it here is kind of it's an arbitrary choice based upon sort of averages and guesses, right? So it's not an exact science. Now, so if we're going to look at this just from Jerusalem, April 18th then is going to be the first day of the first month, because on April 17th, you would see the visible crescent. Now, when we go to this calendar converter that Troy made, and we go back to, there's going to be a 13th month, which they didn't add on this calendar that's Torah calendar, but we did. You're going to see that this is going to have April 16th, April 17th. So April 17th is going to be the day that you would see the visible crescent. And again, April 18th is going to be the first day of the first month. Now, the question is, did this happen? So you can actually go back and look at what was observed in Jerusalem each month. That is, people keep track of this. Now, I didn't go and look at this one in particular. I did look at the one in November, though, because, but I assume that this is correct, that they would have had the first day of the first month being April 18th in 2018. So, so when I go back here, whoops, I need to stay where I was. So now when I'm going to go to the end of the 7th month, you're going to see that there's going to be 29 days in this month. Okay, so that means that I would have to go out on November 9th and see if there is a visible crescent to know whether whether the next day is going to be the first day of the first month, or whether whether there's going to be a 30th day, right? So you can see that there. So there's November 9th. And now if I go to the Torah calendar one, whoops, that's not the right one. Here it is. If I go to this, and then I'm going to go to the beginning of the 8th month, so I have to go to the 9th month. You're going to see on November 8th, you're going to be able to see a visible crescent. Well, it's just above that line. You can see that. So that means I could have said that the 9th of November is the first day of the first month. But since I can't actually wait until the 9th of November to look at the visible crescent, it's going to have to be the 10th of November. Does that make sense to people? Because I can't have 28 days in a month. Now, my recollection is that there was actually, the sky was obscured as well in this particular month. So I think that other people didn't, they actually had to add that extra day. And I think they actually started on November 11th, if I'm not mistaken. So that's what I'm saying, is there's these 3 different dates. I could look at November 9th if I was just looking at the month itself, but not considering the start of the year, 30/29, 30/29. So if I was doing it every month, I would argue that November 9th was the first day of the 8th month. If I was using Troy's, I would say November 10th. And some other people have chosen November 11th for the first day of the first month. So I have 3 different days in which could have been the first day of the 8th month. So you see the problem. It's not very clear cut in this instance. Sometimes it's very clear cut. There's no disagreement regarding which day is the first day of the 8th month. Every calendar agrees. But in this case, we have all of this discrepancy. And because I could have had a 30th day. So November 10th could have been the 30th day of the 8th month, which would make November 11th the first day of the 8th month instead of November 10th. So when I do that, and I go to this here, if November 11th is the first day of the first month, well, if November 10th is the 10th day of the first month, you're going to see that the 15th day of the 8th month is November 24th. And November 22nd would be the 13th day of the 8th month. But if I had started one day later, then this would be the 12th day of the first month. And November 25th would be the 15th day of the 8th month, right? So that's what I chose. If you look at my chart, I chose that there's 30 days in the 7th month and not 29. So I have November 22nd being the 12th day of the 8th month and November 25th, the 15th day of the 8th month. But according to Troy's, it would be the 13th and the 16th. So my idea is that the sky was obscured at this time, and we ended up with 30 days in the 7th month. Anybody have questions about that?
Not at this time.
Okay. Now, originally when I first did this, I think I actually had the 14th day of the 8th month for November 22nd or something like that. I can't remember. I was, because I was trying to figure this out at that time without all of the information. And I was just doing it a few days before. So I was having difficulty trying to figure out what November 22nd was. Now, the event that we predicted in a study on November 21st was that Jeroboam represented Trump, and Jeroboam's hand being restrained meant that Trump's hand was going to be restrained. Now, we're at 9 o'clock here. Does anybody mind if we just take a few more minutes sort of to finish this up, maybe 10 minutes?
Let's go for it, Theodore.
Okay, so if nobody minds, we can just finish this up. So our prediction was that Trump's hand was going to be restrained. Now, we didn't know what the North and the South would represent. That is, we know that there was a prophet who came from Judah, and he came to northern Israel to give this prophecy, and that this has to do with the North and the South. Now, what ended up happening November 22nd, 2018? Does anybody know? Besides it being Thanksgiving.
I'm not easily recalling.
Okay, so I just typed in on Wikipedia for November 22nd, 2018. So I'm going to go there and show you what. In blow to Trump's immigration agenda, federal judge blocks asylum ban for migrants who enter illegally from Mexico. So a federal judge has temporarily blocked the Trump administration from denying asylum migrants who cross the southern border illegally, saying the president violated a clear command from Congress to allow them to apply. Now, this is November 20th, and it was a ruling that was made by the Ninth Court Circuit or whatever it was. And it says, in a ruling Monday, U.S. Judge John S. Tagar of San Francisco issued a nationwide restraining order barring enforcement of the policy President Trump announced November 8th, which he billed as an urgent attempt to stop the flow of thousands of asylum-seeking families across the border each month. So we have this,
It's interesting that that order was issued by a person that was born in London and was appointed by Barack Hussein Obama.
okay, explain how you know all that.
Well, it's easy. You can look up federal judges.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
The situation is that each of these judges have to be appointed by a specific president. So he was appointed by the most liberal president we have seen in recent history, in Barack Hussein Obama, especially being appointed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, or in the Ninth Circuit.
Yeah.
Which is also the most liberal circuit of the United States courts.
Yeah, which I don't really understand the court system, but.
Okay. Each area of the country is under a specific justice of the Supreme Court.
Okay. But they all appeal to the Supreme Court eventually.
Well, you have the way that this goes is you have your local courts, then you have your district courts, and then above that you have your state Supreme Courts. After that you have your circuit courts, and then you can go into the Supreme Court.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, I want to try to finish this up here. So this is from CNN, right? But this is how they depict what happened. So this is on Thanksgiving Day, the date that we predicted that Trump's hand was restrained. President Donald Trump struck a nakedly political tone during a Thanksgiving call with U.S. service members stationed around the world as he steered the conversation toward controversial political topics. Speaking with a U.S. general in Afghanistan, Trump likened the fight against terrorists to his efforts to prevent a group of migrants from illegally entering the United States, and he assailed federal judges who have ruled against his administration. The president also pressed the commanding officer of a Coast Guard ship in Bahrain on trade before touting his trade policies and arguing that every nation in the world is taking advantage of us. U.S. presidents have traditionally called troops stationed abroad during the holidays to boost morale and remind the country of their service, making Trump's rhetoric yet another striking break from the norms of presidential behavior. After the call wrapped, Trump entertained more than 24 questions from reporters and once again discredited a CIA assessment about the killing of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. This was sadly predictable and avoidable, said retired Rear Admiral John Kirby, right? So of course, this is CNN, but one of the things that they're going to talk about, Trump has not shied away from politicizing the military in the past. And on Thursday, he drew on US men and women in uniform to justify his controversial deployment of nearly 6,000 US troops to the southern border. Without evidence, he painted Air Force General David Lyons as a proponent of his hardline immigration policies after Lyons said US troops are fighting in Afghanistan to prevent terrorists from reaching our shores again. And they're going to deal with this Ninth Court Circuit. So earlier this week, a judge from I'll read this sentence before. The topic brought Trump to another familiar airing of grievances as he complained over the phone to the general that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal has become a big thorn in our side. It is a terrible thing when judges take over your protective services when they tell you how to protect your border. It's a disgrace, Trump said. It's a disgrace. Earlier this week, a judge from the North District of California, where cases get appealed to the Ninth Circuit, issued a temporary restraining order blocking the Trump administration from barring migrants who cross into the U.S. illegally from seeking asylum. After the call wrapped, Trump continued to focus on the Ninth Circuit and his administration's efforts to prevent the group of migrants, many of whom were seeking asylum, from crossing into the U.S. illegally.
As he continued to lambaste Ninth Circuit rulings that have skewed against him, Trump called on Congress to get together and stop it, and he threatened to shut down the entire US-Mexico border over the approach of a few thousand migrants. If we find that it gets to a level where we're going to lose control or our people are going to get hurt, we will close entry into the country for a period of time until we can get it under control, Trump warned, the whole border. So, it's very interesting, a lot of this stuff that's going on. So we know that the Ninth Circuit made this restraining order earlier, but here on the 22nd of November, on the Thanksgiving, Trump is going to be using this Thanksgiving and basically addressing what's happening at the border. And the United States is in the north and Mexico's in the south, whether that's significant or not. Now, what's going to happen, though, is that this restraining order is going to be ignored. And it's going to be ignored on the 25th of November. So I'm going to stop there. And we're going to have to look at this then on Sunday morning. And we're going to delve into this issue about this restraining order and what Trump does on the 25th. Now, a friend of mine from Arkansas was actually traveling to Mexico at this time. So that weekend he traveled when these events occurred. So, so what happened on November 25th is that Trump then had American troops firing tear gas and rubber bullets at people trying to cross. So that would suggest that his hand was loosed. Now, when this was presented, and we're going to look at this in more detail next week, but when this was presented on November 10th, 2019, to Jeff and a few other people there at the School of the Prophets, there were people who were quite opposed to that interpretation, saying that it was CNN propaganda, that didn't happen, which I didn't agree with. But there was so much vehemence against it that basically that point wasn't pushed any further. And then Jeff is going to make an interpretation of these events. So we're going to look at how Jeff interpreted this and the interpretation that I had after November 22nd, well, really after November 25th, of these events. Now, so what I see is that you have November 22nd, that's going to be the Thanksgiving, that's the symbol from 977 BC. But also November 25th, being the 15th day of the 8th month, is also a symbol from 977 BC. So these two dates become significant, the Gregorian date and here the biblical date for the loosening. So we're going to look into that. People can look into it themselves, prior to Sunday. But any final comments before we close with prayer?
Not from me.
Okay. From anyone else? So I do think it's an interesting observation. And what we're going to try to explore is, based on these different interpretations, what should we have learned from that prediction? And what can we learn from it now? So it is an interesting history, and it's taken us time to get through this. And I'm not sure how much time it's going to take us to finish this off. But I would think it's going to take at least a few more days till we sort of sort out all of this. So let's close with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful, Lord, for the time that you've given us to study. And we're thankful, Lord, for this past week and for the week coming up in studies as we continue to look at this. We're thankful for the Sabbath that will be coming tomorrow evening. And we ask, Lord, help in all the work and things we have to accomplish in the next couple of days. We ask for your angels' care and protection and your work, the work of your Holy Spirit upon our hearts in bringing conviction and the power to overcome sin. Thank you, Lord, for hearing our prayer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.